welcome back. Today on the show, Cathy Peters is here as our special guest. She's an author, an educator, as well as, an activist. John Euler is standing by. John, Cathy brings with her a lot of information on child sex trafficking right here in Canada. And Dr. Ann Gillies is with you, John, and we've got a lot to cover today. We'll do 2 parts on this episode. So let's turn it over to you, John.
Brad, thank you. And Dr. Ann, thank you for being here. And Cathy Peters, thank you. This is such a timely, unfortunately, it's a timely subject. We're so concerned with those that are pushing the trans movement. Little do people know that this is a perfect opportunity for predators to gain access, direct access to vulnerable kids. And Cathy, you are a wealth of knowledge. Dr. Ann Gillies, you are in Canada, I'm in the States. This is a worldwide issue. This is an issue in North America. Trafficking happens between both countries. And this is a horrific thing. And then as trauma providers, you and me, we deal with the fallout oftentimes of young people that have been sucked into this dark world.
We do for sure, John. Cathy, welcome. I have been so looking forward to this show. We tried a little bit earlier to have you on, and it kind of didn't work. You're a busy woman, but I'm so grateful that you're able to be with us today. And I know that we are going to talk about a lot of different areas, but one of the big things, the big areas that I'm most interested in, and I know you're going to get to it after you share a bit of your story and how you got involved in all this, and that's with the very, we always deal with the most vulnerable, which are our children, and then the most vulnerable among them. But you have a lot of experience within the Indigenous communities in Canada. So we're going to have a really interesting show, not an easy show. It's not going to be easy for people to hear the truth that's out there. But Cathy, I'm so excited that you're able to share with us. So if you would give us some background and kind of what got you started into all this, because I think you, as well as John and I, kind of are some unlikely candidates. And here we end up, doing all these things that we never in our lives thought we would do, right? So take it away, lady. We're looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I just want to start with a quote. Dr. Jackie Linder is a registered psychologist and traumatologist from Alberta. She states, human trafficking is one of the forms of trauma that when you really understand what people are going through and what is being done to them, it is true evil. So that is pretty powerful. How did I really get started on this? Well, I'm a mother bear. Let's just say I'm a mother bear. I've always loved children. I've cared for children. So before we raised our family, I was an inner city high school teacher in the Lower Mainland in the Vancouver area. And I taught in a junior high school, and we had bars on the windows, and the guard dogs came through regularly, mainly checking for drugs. Our students were involved with gang life. And I taught cooking and sewing, and everybody wants to take cooking. And my principal said, well, we've got a gang issue here. The girls are involved with sex trafficking. Do what you can to provide hope and an alternative to that kind of lifestyle. And I said, well, sure, I'll do that. And I was 22 at the time and loved it. Fast forward 40 years later, and I would say I've been really working on this issue now full time after we've raised our family for the last 10 years. And what really did it was our son was working for a member of Parliament. Joy Smith is her name, and she introduced our 3 laws on human trafficking. And at some point, he volunteered me, as my son would do, and say, Mom, you need to take care of a young woman that wants to talk about her trafficking story. And they didn't want to hire a police officer to take care of her. So mom got called in. So I got to be a mom to this girl for 3 days because she, again, wanted to go public with her story. She spoke on CBC. She spoke on the local radio station. And then she spoke at a large gala function. The concern was once these girls, if they get out of the sex industry and they want to talk, And they're in danger. Their lives are at risk. I mean, the sex buyers are going to take them out. The traffickers are going to take them out. So I had to kind of be glued to her for 3 days. And I think that experience what changed my life totally. So I'm just going to give you her short story. And I guess what blew my mind was I couldn't believe it happened in Canada. So the short story was simply she was trafficked at age 11 years of age. Now, how did that happen? This was in Toronto. She was a straight A student, played the flute. She was a track star. She came from a large family of 6 children. They were a Caucasian family. Dad started to drink. The family fell apart. Mom couldn't hold the family together. And the children were put into foster care. I mean, this is a very common problem. And her foster father sexually assaulted her. Bright girl, though. This girl knew it was wrong. So Toronto, she ran. And she ran in Toronto. Within 2 hours, she was picked up by an older man that said, come home with me. I have a house full of girls just like you. I will take care of you. Take care of her, he did for the next 10 years. She was servicing men sexually starting that night at age 11 years of age. She was hooked on alcohol and cocaine, servicing, 10 to 20 men a night, 7 days a week for the next 10 years. I mean, it blows my mind. I don't even know how that's possible, except Joy Smith always said to me, these girls generally don't get out, or boys. Once they're into the sex industry, we say about 5% get out. Otherwise, they become mentally ill. No surprise. They commit suicide. Absolutely. They're definitely drug addicted or they're murdered. Those are the 4 options. So if I sound a bit passionate, I don't want any girl or boy pulled into this in the first place. It's totally the mother bear thing. I wouldn't want it to happen to my own children. So I certainly don't want it to happen to any child. So at the end, when I heard her do her presentation, actually it was in a CBC studio, I'm bawling in the back in the studio, bawling my eyes out. I was a wreck. So we're in the taxi going back to our hotel and she's trying to take care of me. She's going, Mrs. Peters, are you all right? It's all okay. And I go, no. You don't get this. This is not okay. This cannot be happening in Canada. You were 11 years old when you got pulled into this. You were in it for 10 years. This is going to stop. And actually, I made a promise to her that I would stop it in British Columbia. Now, Joy Smith, the MP, was sitting in the front seat. She still remembers when I said to this young woman, I'm going to stop it in BC, and she's held me to it. And the funny thing is, I mean, this whole thing has taken off for the last 10 years. So that's what really, that was the trigger point. That's what got me into this in the first place. And then I had to go to work.
Well, Cathy, the first thing you said was your son voluntold you. Now that's a reversal. My kids are always saying, Mom, quit voluntelling us, but bless him because he knew who to go to, and thank God for mama bears. We know a whole lot more mama bears. Just listening to you and just absorbing what you just said about the emotional reactivity you had. When you are not used to hearing these stories, it is so horrendous. So she was the beginning. She was the first one. And can you update us where she is now? I guess that's just my heart. I just kind of want to know how she is first and then keep going.
I think she's doing really well. I mean, that 3 days we became quite close, obviously. What was fun was she knew I was a Christian woman. So we had 3 meals together each day. And I always said grace. And it got to the point where she was saying to me, please say grace. So we really connected. That was lovely. I think she's doing quite well now. She's in school. I think she wanted to become a social worker. I have not kept track because, she's got her own life. But I did want to say, when I came back to BC, I just assumed the church and everybody else would want to hear about this problem and we're all going to jump in and stop it together. I just assumed that. What I didn't know was that BC is the furthest behind every province in all of Canada in addressing human sex trafficking. As a matter of fact, we have the three most notorious cases in all of Canada. And their famous names. Amanda Todd is the victim. She passed away about 10 years ago, but her mother finally got justice. Reza Mazami is where I'm from, North Vancouver here. He's Canada's #1 trafficker, currently 23 years in jail. And he was targeting a lot of underage girls, and he got caught. And then Robert Pickton, the notorious sex buyer and serial killer, is from the Lower Mainland. As a matter of fact, what police will say to me, or people talking to me about this issue, they say to me, if the sex industry ever pushes back, just say Robert Pickton. That's all you have to say, Robert Pickton. And in case your audience doesn't know, I mean, you can Google his name, but he was probably one of the most brutal killers in the history of the free world, is what I think they say. So what he did was he bought girls, he brought them to his farm after he sexually abused them and had big parties, and everybody else sexually abused these women, typically prostitutes from a bad area in Vancouver. Then he would murder them, kill them, cut them up into bits, and feed the bits to his pigs. I mean, this man was sick. And you talk about evil. The interesting thing is, one of the officers who was in charge of collecting all the body parts and identifying them is my mentor. And he was with the RCMP. He said to me, Cathy, again, just say the name Robert Pickton. Now, typically in the sex industry, they have this sort of saying that they don't mention his name. But I do. I do, because I actually want to stop this crime. And, you know, if we don't start to talk about this, and I'm not here to frighten anybody, I don't want to frighten your audience, but I do want to empower you. You've got to learn the language. You've got to know what to do. You've got to know the resources. You have to know where to go for help. And we got to start talking about this, because what I've learned, and again, I'm a Christian woman, you bring things that are in the dark, bring them out into the light. That's the key.
Well, Cathy, you are among friends on this program, in the sense that we all are passionate about protecting kids. And I appreciate your emphasis, because we have to awaken people that the dangers of the trans movement are manifold. They're many, and they come from a lot of different angles, a lot of different dark special interests. And very few people are aware of the mindset of those that would target young women, young kids. It doesn't matter, boys or girls, but majority of those that are trafficked are girls, are young women. And it is important, and could you share, I mean, I'm a sex offender treatment provider. Ann and I are both trauma providers as far as therapists, but it'll be important for you to share with our audience so they can have another professional, another person that's aware of the profiles. Help our audience understand what's the mindset, what's the method, how do these guys get access to these kids? It's not just in the trans movement by any stretch of the imagination, but wherever there are vulnerable kids. Could you help our audience understand, how does this work? How do these guys gain access? You gave us one example, which was a very classic example. What are some of the things that people should be aware of as far as how these predators operate?
Okay, you asked a lot of questions there, but you gave me some clues. Vulnerability, that's the word. These guys are looking for vulnerability. So when you think of yourself, when you think of your family, when you think of your children, what are their vulnerabilities? And you've got to identify those, because the traffickers are very slick, very sophisticated. They really know what they're doing. So, but I want to talk about two groups. I want to talk about the sex traffickers. They're a different demographic, and they do it they have a different reason for doing what they do. And the sex buyers. Those are two very, very different groups. And in Canada, the good thing is we have a law that really wants to address the sex buyer. He's invisible. So the sex traffickers, they're young, They're typically set between 17 and 35. They're good looking, they're sharp. And how do they do this? Most of it's done online. The grooming and luring now, we say 90% of it is done online. And it's done on the social media platforms typically. And what child now doesn't have access to the internet? What child hasn't been given a device by their parents? Unfortunately, the stats are, we say about 6% of parents are actually monitoring those devices or have boundaries or are going over what their children or youth can or can't do. And I think it was the US Surgeon General that said, you don't want children even on social media platforms if they are 13 and younger. So, but I'm hearing children are getting access at such young ages. And then typically, if youth have a device, they share it with their siblings, with younger friends, with younger children. And that's how this thing is really, all I can say is it's exploded. But I want to talk about the sex buyer for a minute, because again, the law we have in Canada is really, really, really good. You don't have this law down in the States, but we call it the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. And it does focus on the harm. So the harm caused is by the sex buyer. The sex trafficker, it's all about money, just full stop. It's all about making an awful lot of money. They make hundreds of thousands of dollars per victim per year, and it's tax-free, of course, and nobody knows about it. They don't have to pay taxes. But the sex buyer, well, we've got two groups of sex buyers now. We have those that are over 50. They're typically married. They have children. They're successful. They have university degrees. They make over $100,000 a year. They are professionals. They're the doctors, the lawyers, policemen, teachers, you name it. They make enough money that they can afford to hire a lawyer if they get caught. So they are invisible. Nobody talks about the sex buyer. They are completely invisible. So they can be your politicians. Politicians are very much a part of this. But anybody sort of that has power and privilege, those are your sex buyers. They're not necessarily, they just want sex. They want sex. They're not necessarily pedophiles. They just want sex. They don't care what form it comes. Although the younger now, the better, because then that young person doesn't have diseases, will do whatever they want, etc. But we have a new group now of sex buyers developing. And it's the young men that are ages, we say 18 to 30, who are hooked on pornography and then want to act out on what they view. So that's a whole new demographic that's developed. Now, they don't have the cash resources that the older sex buyers do, but they're almost more dangerous because they've got hooked on pornography typically when they're quite young. So, I mean, you know what the neuroscience, what it's done to their brains. I mean, they're really hooked, and this is serious. They're going to act out. Whereas the older sex buyers, they may or may, well, yeah, they're usually hooked on pornography, but it's not that same sort of deep ruts in the brain where they're really, those images are really in there. Because pornography, and I call pornography the fuel for all of this, we're getting younger and younger, young people getting hooked on pornography. So this is where this whole thing is really going to go sideways. Again, the good news in Canada, in the Senate, apparently it was just passed to have age verification, so nobody under 19 can access pornography. So there's lots going on, certainly in the political realm, and I want your viewers to find out what's going on in your state, what's going on in your province, what's going on nationally. But I hope that answers your question a little bit, John. Again, I'm not sort of a medical type. I'm an educator, and again, because I hear people's stories. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories. Because I'm this mother bear, everybody phones me and talks to me. And so I get to hear all the stories. What I do is I document, and then I talk about it. And then I go to the powers that be, the politicians, law enforcement, frontline service providers, to ask for help. So my lane is simply the education piece.
How has that worked out with educators and police? I'd like to know the answer to that question.
You mean using children?
Well, using the police just to do what you do and trying to get them to, I guess, engage with you on everything that you present to them. You bring a lot of validity to what you're saying, and there's facts to go with it. So are they agreeing? Are they accepting? Are they joining the force? Or are they, whoa, wait a minute, we're not going to head down this path?
No, totally. I mean, I think Anne, or Dr. Gillies was going to ask me the question, how did I get started with all of this? And I mean, I really did start with trying to raise awareness with the church and got no response. Then I went to law enforcement. I thought, well, if anybody's going to get this, it's law enforcement. So they have been awesome. Fantastic, actually. All the police agencies in British Columbia know me really well. The RCMP, you know, they wear their lovely red jackets and ride horses. They've been awesome to the point that they asked me to present on their first human trafficking webinar for all of Canada for law enforcement just last summer. So law enforcement, I say to everybody, they're your best friend. Sure, there's bad apples in any organization, any institution. I mean, there's bad doctors, there's bad teachers. I mean, bad politicians, I mean, no surprise. People are people are people. We're talking humanity here. The good news is I'm meeting fantastic officers. I let them know everything I do. They know where I am. They know what I'm doing. I share all of my scripts with them. And I'm not making money at this. I'm doing this all on my own time and my own dime. So what I say to people is, here's my script. Use my scripts. All I care about is stopping this. That's all I care about. So the police, I send them all my scripts and use this for training purposes. I do want to say my book is coming out in May, and here it is, Child Sex Trafficking in Canada and How to Stop It. I mean, this is the textbook. It's all right here, and it's not scary. It's not a scary book to read. I'm not gory or anything. I do have survivor stories, but it really is a textbook. It's a primer on explaining the issue, what it looks like, just what you were asking me, John. What does this thing look like? And then what can we do just as parents, as educators, as ordinary Canadians and Americans to stop this? Now, this book is useful for Americans too. Again, it will be available on Amazon and online, probably mid-May sometime. I mean, it's going for $30. Boom. If people have me come and speak in person, you can have my book for $20 if I bring it. Also, here's my pamphlet. But what's really useful is my website. And I would encourage any of your listeners to go to my website, beamazingcampaign.org. This website is a training website. It's just one page. Super easy, but it's got all of my resources, all the research, my latest interviews. It's all here. It's a one-stop shop. Anybody that goes here will automatically be an expert on this issue, know what to do, where to get help. So I've got the website, and then I've got my book coming up.
Oh, Cathy, you are, I just love how organized your mind is. I love it. I love it. I know John wants to ask you a question. I'm butting in here, John, because I want to go back just to what you said about our Canadian law, about no pornography access under 19. Explain that, because of course that does not prevent children, on social media. Tell me a little bit more what the law actually does encompass, because I think that's important for people to understand.
Well, we're not there yet. It's not law yet. It just got passed in the Senate. It's going to the House of Commons. And there's an MP there, Karen Vecchio from Ontario, that is going to talk about it. And then the House of Commons have to vote on it. But the law that I'm really concerned about now, absolutely, that pornography law, again, it's to bring in age verification. So they've already got it in France. They've got it in Spain. They're bringing it into the UK. And the United States will go down this road too. But it would be really great if Canada got it, because now we have so much research. It's overwhelming, the harm that pornography is causing to our youth and to our children. I mean, they have access and they're watching it and then they act out on it. That's what people don't understand. But the law that I'm really concerned about, I want everybody to know, is the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. This is the law we cannot lose in Canada. This is the law you all want in every state in the States. We call it the equality model. And basically what it does is it criminalizes the buyers of sex and the traffickers and the facilitators. The sellers of sex are immune, and there's supposed to be exit strategies in place, and then a robust prevention, education, awareness campaign. And we're not good on any of those things in Canada or United States. Although I will say in the States, you talk about all this stuff. Americans are far better about talking about all this stuff. Canadians, we're so nice. We're nice, lovely people. We don't talk about nasty things.
Cathy, that's well put. As a matter of fact, what you've just described in this act sounds very much like what's called the Nordic model. Nordic, that's right. So the Nordic model has, and it sounds, it originates, right, as it sounds, and it really is trying to correct the script, which it used to be that those that were the prostitutes were the ones that were arrested. Now the reality has hit home that those that are in prostitution, that are actually laying themselves down, so to speak, on behalf of this whole thing, in the transaction, they are typically being trafficked, or they're certainly being harmed, and they can't speak up. And so the presumption is now, the reality is, it is the pimp, it is the buyer, or what used to be called the John. But those that are the prostitutes are actually no longer being viewed as criminals, but being exploited, and therefore they're being helped out of the industry, so to speak.
Exactly. You summed it up.
Go on.
Well, that is probably a great place to wrap up with part one. We're down to just a couple of more minutes. This has been insightful. I'm sure glad I live where I live, and I've got the lifestyle that I have and my family that I have, and that we watch out for that every single day as they take the bus and they move their way throughout, teenage years, and try to keep them away from all of that nastiness that you are so embedded in, Cathy. It's disturbing to say the least. Again, please visit Cathy's website. There is a lot there that you're going to be able to educate yourself on as parents. There's a lot there that's going to help you even just be able to communicate with your own kids too, because you have to get involved in the language of this all, whether it's unmasking the trans movement or, unfortunately, child sex trafficking here in Canada. It is an issue, and, well, good people like you, Cathy, are standing up, Dr. Ann and John from, his stateside residence, and I do this as a volunteer as well, and people don't maybe understand that, but we're here to help, and that's exactly why Unmasking the Trans Movement exists. And the trans movement, while this particular topic doesn't necessarily fit into that within our first segment, I'm sure that there's a dynamic here that John's going to help get to in part two, and that will, again, expose so much of what is really happening here in Canada and throughout North America as they try to break the family mold and really create divisiveness between parents and children. Thank you very much to all of you for being here. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. You can find us on BitChute. All of our episodes are there. Just search Unmasking the Trans Movement. You can also check us out on our website at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. Till next time, I'm Brad Wilder saying so long. Remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight.